Think about the last time you walked into a room and instantly felt the tension. Like nobody was yelling, nobody was arguing. But the moment you crossed the threshold, your shoulders tightened up, your breathing got just a little bit shallower, and you felt this, I don't know, this undeniable weight in the air.
Right, you caught a vibe.
Exactly. You caught a vibe. We have all been there. But today, we are looking at source material that argues catching a vibe isn't just a casual figure of speech. It is actually the biological foundation of how we experience the world. And more surprisingly, it might be the key to world peace.
It really is a profound shift in how we understand our interactions. So the excerpts we're looking at today come from the fascinating text called Somatic Foundations of Peace and Equality. And what it does is it takes these incredibly lofty, abstract ideas, peace, equality, justice, and it completely strips them of their usual political or philosophical wrapping.
Which is so refreshing because normally when we talk about peace or equality, we treat them like architectural blueprints. We think of them as these grand moral standards. We memorize the blueprint. We argue about it on social media. We might even frame it and put it on the wall.
You can't actually live inside a piece of paper.
No, you
Yeah.
really can't. And this text points out a massive, often ignored gap between believing in an ideal and genuinely embodying it. So our mission for today's deep dive is to explore that gap. We're going to look at how our nervous systems might actually hold the key to truly connecting with others.
And that gap between belief and embodiment is everything. The text establishes a really clear baseline right from the start. It says holding a belief in your mind is fundamentally different from living from it in your body.
Right.
I mean, peace can be studied. You can theorize about it in a university classroom. You can even perform it in how you dress or the tone of voice you use. But the source material is adamant that none of those activities actually constitute embodiment.
Hold on, though, because embodiment is one of those words that gets thrown around so much in like wellness circles that it's almost lost its meaning. What does this text actually mean when it says we have to embody peace?
Yeah, that's a great question. The definition here is brilliant because it removes the pressure of perfection. It says, embodiment is not a destination.
Okay.
It's not some enlightened achievement where you finally get a gold star and you never get angry again. It defines it as a threshold, like a literal physical reorganization of the self.
A physical reorganization.
Right. It's the tipping point where a value stops being something you have to consciously apply to a situation, and it becomes the place you're operating from. You stop reaching out toward peace, and you begin moving from it.
I love that. If you've ever felt completely exhausted by trying to be a good or peaceful person, this is probably why. You're trying to project those qualities outward, you're doing all this heavy intellectual lifting, but leaving your actual body and your nervous system completely unchanged. And to understand how we actually bridge that gap, the text offers a pretty sharp critique of how society usually gets peace wrong, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. It critiques Western cultures specifically for over-intellectualizing the concept. We tend to treat peace either as a geopolitical arrangement, like the signing of a treaty between nations, or as a psychological attitude, a mindset, basically.
Right, like just thinking positive thoughts.
Yeah. But the text argues neither of those framings reaches deep enough. Peace, in its truest, fullest sense, is a somatic condition.
The fact, meaning of the body. So we are talking about biology here, not just psychology.
Precisely. It is the physical tone of your body's internal environment. It's your physiological relationship to threat and safety. Now, we hear about the autonomic nervous system a lot these days, right? Usually through the lens of trauma and anxiety, the fight, flight, or freeze responses.
Oh, yeah, constantly.
But what the text highlights is that the nervous system also has a profound innate capacity for what it calls genuine settledness.
Okay, let me stop you there. Let's unpack this. Because settledness sounds a lot like just spacing out on the couch watching Netflix. How is this different from just being detached or lazy?
It's a really common misconception, but the text is very clear that genuine settledness is not passivity. It is not suppression, and it's certainly not dissociation. The organism, meaning the person, is fully alive, fully attentive, and entirely capable of responding to the environment.
Okay, so you're still present.
Absolutely. The critical difference is that the nervous system has ceased to treat ordinary everyday existence as a field of danger. The physical bracing in your muscles just drops, the diaphragm relaxes, and breath moves freely. Your brain isn't subconsciously surveilling the room, waiting for an attack.
That makes me think of a computer operating system. Like imagine your brain is a laptop and you just downloaded this really nice, shiny new application called Peaceful Thoughts. You want to run it, but Your underlying operating system is running this deep background threat detection loop that is eating up like 90% of your CPU.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Right. That peaceful app is going to crash. It's going to lag. You're going to get the spinning wheel of death. You can't just force the app to work better by clicking it harder. You literally have to update the OS. You have to change the somatic substrate.
That is a perfect analogy. And what's fascinating here is that the text points out a biological reality that takes this OS update even further. Our nervous systems are social organs.
Meaning they interact with each other.
Yes, they do not operate in isolation. They are constantly, continuously reading one another. Like, as we sit across from each other right now, our nervous systems are scanning tone of voice, the micro-expressions around the eyes, posture, and even the subtle rhythm of our breathing.
Wait, really? Are you saying peace is literally contagious? Like an actual biological mechanism?
In the most literal sense, yes.
Yeah.
A genuinely settled person creates what the source material calls a field effect. They exert this gentle magnetic pull on the people around them, drawing those nervous systems toward regulation. Yeah, think about the mechanics of it. When you are near someone who is deeply calm, their slow breathing and relaxed facial muscles send signals that bypass your conscious intellectual brain. It speaks directly to your amygdala, the threat center.
Just bypassing the intellect entirely.
Exactly. It whispers, "We are safe here." And it happens entirely without persuasion or argument. The text calls it the silent eloquence of an organized body.
Okay, so if my nervous system is broadcasting my internal state to the room and pulling people toward regulation, what happens when that broadcast encounters someone society tells me is fundamentally different from me? Or even lesser than me? Does my biology override my politics, or do my politics corrupt my biology?
That is the exact question the text pivots to next. We usually think of equality strictly as an ethical principle or, a political standard, a corrective for historical injustice, which the text affirms is incredibly real and necessary. But beneath that political layer is a somatic layer. The text asks, what does it actually feel like, physically, to genuinely experience another person as your equal? And it introduces a concept to explain this called ontological ranking.
Ontological ranking. Okay,
Yeah.
ontology being the study of existence or being.
Right. Ontological ranking is the deep somatic assumption that some beings are fundamentally more real, more valuable, or more deserving of consideration than others.
Wow.
And the text argues this isn't just an ugly ideology you hold in your head. It is a physiological reflex that is encoded in your physical behaviors long before you even realize you're doing it.
So what does that actually look like in practice? Because I think a lot of people listening would say, well, I believe everyone is equal, but how does the body, give away the lie?
Well, think about walking down a city street. Notice who you naturally give full, sustained eye contact to, and whose face your eyes just sort of glide past without registering.
Oh, that's heavy.
It is. Notice whose pain registers in your body as an urgent, visceral emergency. Like if a colleague trips and falls in the office, your heart rate spikes and you rush over.
Yeah, you immediately react.
Right. Contrast that with seeing an unhoused person struggling on the sidewalk, where your heart rate might stay completely steady, because your brain has comfortably abstracted them into a statistic or categorized them as other.
That is incredibly confronting. And it lives in the subtle quality of how we listen, too, doesn't it? Like, whether we actually let another person's words land and move us, or whether those words hit a layer of pre-filtering where we just reduce that person to an already known category.
Exactly. It's a physical defensiveness.
Wait, if you were hearing this right now, you might be throwing up a red flag. I know I did when I first read this section.
Yeah, it's a common reaction.
Right, because if we're supposed to treat everyone as a physical equal at this deep nervous system level, does that mean we have to erase all differences? Like, am I supposed to flatten every distinction between people or deny functional hierarchies? Like the one between a teacher and a student or a doctor and a patient?
That's a really valid question.
Because does embodying equality mean I just have to walk around being universally sentimental and affectionately hugging everyone I meet?
It's a very natural pushback. And the text explicitly addresses that fear. It clarifies that genuine equality is not sameness. It does not require the erasure of difference.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, nor does it demand that you suddenly agree with everyone or even like them. What embodied equality actually feels like physically is permeability.
Permeability, like a membrane that lets things pass through instead of a solid wall.
Yes, beautifully put. It means that when another person arrives in your space, you do not receive them merely as a representative of a category. You don't brace yourself against them as a problem to be managed or assess them as an opportunity to be leveraged for your own gain.
You just let them be a person.
You simply allow them to arrive as a presence. You let their reality register in your nervous system as completely real. That receptivity doesn't mean you agree with their opinions. It just means you aren't somatically dismissing their right to exist in the same space.
So if striving for this, if trying really hard to force myself to feel peaceful and treat everyone with this deep permeability doesn't work, how do we actually get there? Because it sounds like you can't just white-knuckle your way into this state.
You absolutely cannot. The text calls this the ultimate paradox of practice. You cannot achieve embodied peace and equality through effortful striving.
Because trying makes it worse.
Exactly. The very attempt to force yourself to feel peaceful produces physical tension. You are literally fighting yourself to be calm, which your nervous system interprets as a conflict, not safety.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
And the attempt to perform equality when you don't actually feel it produces what the text brilliantly terms managed tolerance.
Managed tolerance. Wow. We have all been on the receiving end of that. Like, think about the classic customer service smile. The person is saying all the politically correct things, their behavior looks right on paper, they are being polite, but your nervous system is screaming that it's fake.
Right, you can feel it.
You can feel the underlying tension. You can feel that you're being managed rather than met.
Because their body is still holding that ontological ranking, and your body is reading it via the field effect, regardless of the words they're using.
So true.
So if striving and faking it don't work, the text points to a different mechanism. It calls it practiced subtraction.
Practice subtraction.
Instead of trying to add a thick layer of performative peace over top of your anxiety, you engage in the gentle, ongoing removal of the things that block your natural openness.
But if I'm terrified of losing my job or, I'm dealing with serious family drama, just removing that tension sounds nearly impossible. What does practicing subtraction actually look like in a real stressful moment?
Subtraction is actually profoundly practical. It looks like sitting in a tense meeting, noticing that you have been holding your breath for the last 3 minutes and actively choosing to exhale.
Just letting the breath out.
Yeah, it's noticing that your shoulders are up around your ears and consciously letting them drop, rather than aggressively trying to force yourself to smile at a boss who is irritating you. It's about removing the physical blockers.
And the text outlines specific blockers, right? I mean, fear is obviously a huge one. Habit. The ego's desperate need to look good and sound smart.
Yes, and interestingly, the source material also names the unresolved grief of having been treated as unequal as a profound blocker.
Oh, wow.
When you have been marginalized, that unresolved grief leaves the nervous system in a chronic state of vigilance. It's a very necessary survival mechanism, but that chronic bracing makes genuine, permeable meaning incredibly difficult to access.
This explains why so many traditions like contemplative practices, somatic therapy, breath work, they focus so heavily on preparation rather than performance. You can't think your way into embodiment. You can only gently clear out the tension so that the internal environment is ready for it to naturally arise. And here's where it gets really interesting. The text has this beautiful, poetic visual for what it looks like when someone actually achieves this state.
The quality of light metaphor.
Yes, it says that the more genuinely a person embodies these qualities, the less they announce it. It doesn't look like flags planted on a hill, which is loud, performative, and demanding everyone's attention. Instead, the person's presence becomes like the quality of light in a room.
It's pervasive. It's highly effective because it allows everyone else in the room to see clearly and navigate safely. But it is essentially unremarkable to the person it flows through.
They aren't constantly congratulating themselves on how peaceful they are.
No, they just are. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this brings us to the core thesis of the entire text. Why peace and equality are paired together in the first place. They aren't just independent virtues grouped together by coincidence. They are expressions of the exact same underlying biological condition.
It's one root with two branches. The text argues they both stem from dissolving the self's need to assert superiority or separateness.
Think about the mechanics of it. A person who is genuinely at peace has stopped fighting themselves. They have declared an internal ceasefire between who they actually are and who society tells them they should be.
And that internal ceasefire creates an immense amount of spaciousness.
Yes, and that spaciousness is the exact ground required for genuine equality. You cannot truly receive another person. You cannot be permeable to them if you are locked in combat with yourself. Your internal combatant is simply too busy, too defended to actually see the human being standing in front of you.
And it works in reverse, too. The text points out that when you start regarding others as equal as a baseline reality, internal peace suddenly becomes way more accessible.
It really does.
Because you free up all this immense energy that you used to spend ranking people, comparing yourself to them, positioning yourself socially, and defending your ego against perceived slights. There is simply less data for your nervous system to manage.
Which is an incredible relief to the body. But this brings us to the ultimate pressure test of the entire philosophy. Because anyone can feel peaceful and permeable when they are sitting entirely alone in a quiet room meditating.
Right. Solitude is easy.
Solitude is not the test. The truest test of embodied peace and equality is relationship, specifically relationship under pressure.
Because the real world demands so much more from us than a quiet room. So what does this all mean for you listening? This is where the text asks you to look at your actual life. It's asking how you show up across the holiday table from a family member whose worldview you fundamentally oppose.
Or how you handle a client who is actively yelling at you.
Exactly. Embodied peace means having the physical capacity to remain present with someone else's distress or anger without your own nervous system catching on fire and without trying to manage them from a safe distance.
And in those difficult moments, embodied equality looks like something very specific. The text defines it as listening that is not waiting to speak.
Oh, that's powerful.
It is having curiosity about the other person that isn't strategic or designed to trap them in an argument. It's the willingness to let yourself be affected by someone you have been culturally conditioned to dismiss. It is recognizing in a person vastly different from you the exact same fundamental quality of being that you recognize in yourself.
None of which are techniques you can fake in the moment. I mean, if your nervous system is screaming that this person is a threat to your identity, you aren't going to be capable of non-strategic curiosity. Your biology just won't allow it.
Which is why this slow, patient reorganization of the self from the inside out is not some optional feel-good supplement to the project of creating a better world. It is the absolute foundation.
It has to start there.
Yeah, and this leads to the final dimension the text explores, which is transmissibility and legacy. What lives in the individual body transmits to the bodies around it via that field effect we discussed earlier. But over time, it scales up. It transmits to the relational field and eventually to the collective structures those bodies build together.
The text calls this becoming architectural. It stops being just a personal vibe and becomes the actual framework of a society.
Right. When a community is made up of individuals who are moving from a baseline of settledness and permeability, it fundamentally changes how that community operates. It changes how they handle conflict and make decisions.
It changes everything.
It changes how resources are distributed and, crucially, how they treat the vulnerable. Care becomes less of a performative charity and more of a foundational reflex. We cannot build peaceful, equitable societal structures out of frantic, defensively contracted nervous systems.
It's the long arc of embodiment. It starts in your individual nervous system, it ripples into your relationships, it moves into the collective, and eventually it solidifies into structures that outlast your single life. The text frames this genuine embodiment of peace and equality as ultimately an act of pure generosity.
It really is. You are literally giving the people around you a different biological possibility of what it means to be human together. We have to move the map back into the territory. We have to take these ideals out of our heads and install them in our bodies.
So to wrap up our journey today, we took the concepts of peace and equality down from the dusty intellectual shelf. We learned that true embodiment isn't a gold star you earn. It's a threshold where you reorganize your nervous system.
It requires practice subtraction.
Right. Gently exhaling, dropping the shoulders, and letting go of blockers like fear and ego, rather than forcefully striving to be good. And we saw how these internal ceasefires ultimately transmit outward, reshaping the very architecture of our communities through the biological tether of the field effect.
It's incredible how interconnected it all is.
It really is.
Yeah.
But before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on everything we just discussed. The text argues so convincingly that our nervous systems are social organs and that genuine peace is contagious through highly physical cues, microexpressions, posture, the subtle rhythm of someone's breath that tells our amygdala we are safe.
Yeah, all those little signals.
But look at the world we live in today. As our society becomes increasingly remote, as our primary social interactions, our debates, our work meetings, and our conflicts happen more and more through screens interfaces that strip away those subtle physiological signals, Are we inadvertently starving our nervous systems of the very cues they need to feel safe?
That is a fascinating question.
Right. If embodiment relies on this physical field effect, how do we transmit genuine settledness through a digital interface? Can you feel the quality of light through a pixel? It's something to think about the next time you open your laptop to engage with the world, or the next time you actually have the opportunity to sit in the same physical room with someone.
Definitely something to reflect on.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. As you go out into your day, pay attention to your physical baseline. Stop reaching for the blueprint and try to notice the quality of light you're bringing into your own rooms today.